Good morning, day, afternoon. Here we have one of 4 guitars come in from Hugh. I haven't seen for a couple of years nearly. This is an Ibanez PF100, a lovely old Fujigen, I think, made these, and it's kind of got a lot of similarities to the Ibanez or the Antoria stroke Ibanez what do they call it? Not little, Deluxe 59er type, a slightly different shape and everything in the body, but very similar kind of feel. This is, unlike the Antoria, this has supply molded plywood top rather than the solid maple top, which the other one, the one I mentioned, has, and it doesn't have the lawsuit headstock that this one. This doesn't have the lawsuit headstock that the Antoria had. Anyway, it's a favourite of Hugh's, and it's really brought in just for a nut swap. But also, he kind of reported a bit of some sort of vibration noise coming down here off the high E. It's very difficult to know what is causing that. I mean, his first thing was, could I cut down the slot a little bit here? And I'm not, looking at this, I'm not sure that moves at all over the slot. I mean, there's a reduced or a relatively small amount of break angle here, which is typical when you put a Duesenberg Les Trem on a guitar with a fairly low bridge, because the start point of the strings on the Les Trem are quite high up, so it kind of takes away some of the. No, it doesn't take away the break angle. What it does is this unit here is suited for a fairly standard Les Paul style bridge, which lifts it high and gives you back this break angle. So any bridge that's slightly non-standard, i.e. non-tunematic, the Duesenberg can seem a little low or too little break angle, and it's because, I don't know how well you can see that. Instead of lifting up a guitar, I just lift the camera. Excuse the Velcro noise. The damn, can't see anything. Right, we're on a wire, you see. So the issue is where vertically away from the body these strings begin, and you can see they start fairly high up, and then as a result the break angle is quite limited, because for it to be any greater the bridge has to be higher. Which, I was going to say, it can often be on a typical Les Paul, but I think there's little leeway for using the Les Trem and having a very low action and having a flatter profile bridge. Just yeah, if I were redesigning this, I would start these a little lower down if at all possible. I don't know if it is possible, but it may be that this is seated. No, this is directly, there is a little washer or a platform you can sometimes put under here, but I don't think this has it, although this is slightly off the ground. This being a little further down might help it. If there is a washer under there, it might be advisable to drop it down a tiny step. But it's a beautiful unit. I love these Les Trems. So the idea with this, I'll tell you what, let's put you back up on here. I've got a radio in my ear because I'm listening out for a particular pronouncement. I've got my ear to the ground, so forgive me if I stop and go ha ha. So there's a replacement bone nut, nice looking thing, exactly the same string spacing. We will need to cut it down first to get it to size, or approximately to size. But we don't, as I've said many times before, when you're changing a nut, you don't want to cut it down too far, because it's really difficult to cut it precisely the way we need it on these guitars. Very difficult to cut it precisely. What's the fender strap? Oh my god, I've lost track. Isn't that terrible? Oh, hellfire. I've done that thing of taking someone's strap off. Right, I have to go back through my customers. Sugar. Damn, I will go back. I've got the strap. Damn. Oh, hellfire. hate doing that. Occasionally I do it. Take off someone's strap, put it there, forget it, get the guitar ready to go back. It could be that it's Jim's. I will take it in and just be absolutely sure, because that hasn't gone back yet, and I'll double check it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have a listen to this thing. Ooh. Oh, it's quite ringing, quite a big sound. Okay, turn the pickups all the way up. Nice. Not keeping tune very well. Give those a shot of contact cleaner as well. It's only dust, so. See what happens when I pull the strings a bit. This will be it could well be a slack issue. The thing is, you don't want to be using a tremolo like this with strings that have got any slack in them. It's also slightly pinging in the nut too. Boy, these are big pickups, man. The output's huge. Well, it seems huge. That's on a very low setting on the amp compared to a lot of pickups. I do like them. See what happens when we rough them up. Kill switch. Yeah, I like it. Tuning is unstable though. Okay, so we got a couple of issues. The one that Hugh's talking about, the sound on the E, I have to keep an ear out for because I can't really tell what's happening there. But I can definitely, we can definitely see there's some crackling in the pot, and we need a new nut, and we need those slots cut in correctly. So I've got my more super duper accurate whatchamacallit thing to be able to tell me exactly what gauge these are now. 42s. and 9s. So that's 9s. Let's just put it down here. 9s, and I'll just double check what we've got in terms of the action in case anything moves. I just want to be able to put it back where Hugh likes it and not go anywhere else away from that. So on the low E we have got 1.6, and on the high E we've got 1.75, 1.6, 1.75, low 1.6, high 1.75. So the high E is a bit higher, and this may be something to do with the nut slot. There's quite a lot of room in there. Okay, so when you take the strings off on something like this, this tremolo is basically a floating trem, and you will just tune it back up to meet the equilibrium, and it will just take as long as it requires to get there. So the key thing about this is once you've got new strings on, and I would oh, there they go, of course they fall straight out. I would put new strings on this regardless of what am I doing? What am I doing? Oh, Sam, what are you doing? You're doing the nut. Oh, you don't want to take them off, but then they fall off this thing. That's what confused me. Yeah, when you're using when you're restringing with this tremolo, this Duesenberg on it, you want to put the strings on roughly, loosely-ish first, and then you want to stretch the hell out of them before you go anywhere near attempting to set the tremolo equilibrium, because you'll be led up the garden path if you're trying to do it and the thing's retuning itself as you're going. So it's like any sort of tuning situation. You really have got to get the slack out before you do anything. Same with I always find the same with what do you call them, Floyd Rose. The Floyd Rose is hard. It's not. Hello. That's not necessarily so good. It's a hard enough, or it can be precise little thing to get right as it is, without throwing a load of brand new strings or slack stored up instability into the mix, because it will just drive you nuts really. Speaking of nuts, here we have the plastic original, very deep slots in there, obviously been cut a bit as well by the looks of it, so it's not absolutely ideal. Now we've got a nut that is probably just a tiny bit fat, and it isn't the straightest of nut slots here in the world, so I'll try and clear that up a little bit as we go, get the best sort of result we can out of it. Sorry if this is pointing out at the, hope you can't see too much of the bright lights of the outside world here. That's the point of putting it on here. So I'm just using this very fine slot chisel just to try and clear up some of the goo that was already in here. I'm not cutting wood, I'm just cutting the glue really, and trying to, it's one of the toughest things when you're doing a nut replacement or any nut fitting, is the integrity of the corner, the 90 degree if you like, the corner. It's very difficult to match whatever corner you can cut, joint angle, that's the word, with the shape of the nut, because it's microscopically it's never perfect. You can work quite hard to get it a square fit. There's a little hollow here where the wood is chipped out, so we don't want to increase that, but it means the nut is actually floating a bit at that point. I'm just going to kind of try and make this wide enough to take the new nut. Yeah, like I say, it's chipped away here, so when you look close up at these things, it's a really difficult thing to get right, and it can be quite tricky. Getting a flat shape all the way across without a jig of some clever invention can be really difficult. So really what I'm just doing here, more than anything, is trying to clean it up rather than cut any wood. I don't want to be chopping anything away and changing the shape of this slot if possible, unless it's so faulty that it needs it. scraping the face of the rosewood here. Just want to get it clear of glue. So if necessary, and it is probably necessary, I'll thin this down a little bit so it fits. Ideally we want it to fit into the kind of groove left by the paint, which is often sprayed on after the nut's fitted, and it kind of comes up to the edge of the nut a bit like a carpet. It kind of curls up at the edge. So if you were going to cut that back, you have to take off a fair bit of this curled up paint. So I'm just trying to square this off as best I can without changing the nut shape, slot shape. Down there you go. It's a long time actually before I got this little chisel, and I would get another one in a heartbeat. It's really important to have something like this pretty much standing by only for nut slots, so it doesn't get heavy duty use, but you really do need it for the nut slots because they are so delicate and precise. This is just a bit of glue around the truss rod cover. This is like a plug of glue there. It's not really doing anyone any good. Okay, well this one would sit nicely if we were putting that back on, but we're not. So front face looks good, and now it's too deep, and rather than cut this paintwork back, I'm going to use my sandpaper department to adjust the nut. When you're sanding, you want to also just check that you're taking off an even amount, and that you're keeping the angle between the bottom surface and the top the same. You just have to keep a close eye on it when you're doing it, that's all. It's easy to wander off, and you need to be able to correct it before it goes too badly wrong. That's looking alright. Nearly. It'll basically click back in almost between the edge of the paint and the edge of the slot, so we're not far off. Nearly there. We could press it in there. It's now starting to catch on, but I want it to sit a bit more freely than that. Now it's starting to just get a little bit thinner at the bottom, taller at the top, so I'm just going to press down a bit harder at the top and balance this out. Okay, a bit more on the lighter grade. So I've got 4 hues here to do, 3 in the next couple of days. The 3 I've got to do in the next couple of days, that fits nicely, are some relatively simple jobs. So it's nut changes and also a couple of pickup changes. So we've got this Ibanez here, vintage Ibanez, and we've also then got 2 West tones. We've got a West tone, oh god, what's it called? Premier or something, Hellfire, Superior, something 1960s sounding, and we've got a West Tone Concord, which has been through here before, but this time it's having a pickup change. The pickups are really nice on it. They were lovely single coils, lovely sounding. I remember overall lovely guitar to play. I refretted it, I set it up, but this is coming in for having a, there we go, that's perfect. We're going to get a rail in the bridge position because Hugh wants a bit more bite Okay, so we've got the width side of things just about spot on. Is it kind of, maybe it wants to be a little bit fraction thinner. It's trying to sit up just on the paint unless we push it in. So we'll look from both sides. Now I think it needs a tiny bit more off. I mean, you could check another way if you have got sensitive enough, whatchamacallit, thingy. We've got 5.55 according to that. This is now 5 point the same, so we're kind of pretty much on the mark, but it's just not quite sitting right where I want it yet. I'm also going to just adjust the angle here slightly too. Now the other thing, of course, is we've got tons of height to remove off this, so that's the next stage, and this is where, like I said before, we really need to estimate it more than anything else, and we don't want to overcut, so we do need to allow some cutting downwards to get it the way we want it. So rule number one is do not think that you can cut this to the precise depth from below. It just will not happen. Right, let me turn this around at this point. It won't happen. You'll overcut every time. So you need to be doing it by approximation to begin with, and then fine-tuning by bringing the action down from above by cutting the nut slots. Okay. So what I can do is, as a comparison, I can see where these things differ, and I mean this is an eyeballing still, remember, so I can lose a millimetre off here, just as a guess, but an educated guess I would say. So I'm going to mark up that millimetre for my own eyeballing benefit. It's actually probably a little bit more, but we'll take the millimetre as a conservative estimate. It's very hard to cut a curved nut when you're resting a ruler on it, and you need to use the edge as a reference, or hard to draw on it even, I should say. And that sort of works. A little cloud of bone dust there for you, Chinese bone dust. Lord only knows where that came from. I dread to think sometimes. Right, so I'm just gonna, now you could file this down if you're up to it. Filing can sometimes cause splits and cracks, and before you know it you can have whole chunks of the nut, otherwise good nut, flying off and leaving you kind of stuck. So I prefer to sand, and now the key part of this now is getting this vertical, or the 90 degrees between the two faces of the nut. And currently I'm leaning forward a little bit, so I need to kind of straighten the nut up and just let the sandpaper cut it back to 90 degrees without too much pressure, but consistent position really is what matters at this point. Okay, we're kind of nearly there. I mean, we're with the right shape, but we're still off in height. Now, if you're feeling nervous and you don't want to keep going sort of cutting upwards, if you're nervous, then glue it into place and do all the work cutting down, and you can there's no limit to how far you can cut down. It gets a bit harder as you go deeper, but you can always tidy up the superfluous, no, what's the word, you know, unneeded, superfluous, no, whatever, you know, the stuff you don't need above the action that you're looking for. Right, I'm going to just flatten this out now very carefully, and then I'm going to stop and call that the start point for cutting downwards. So I'm now focusing on the squareness of this base, I want this absolutely square, 90 degrees, so that it will seat perfectly, and that's looking very good. Right, so there we go. It's quite a way to go down, but again, oh Christ, those people leave bits sticking out of their strings, you. It's always bound to get me stung. If you want to check, I mean, one way of checking how far you can go is put the nut in place, stand it up where it needs to be, like that, and then you can check and tighten up if you need to, but you can check, broadly speaking, the sit, you know, of your string above the first fret. So you've got to get this in the gap. I'm wondering if that's still sitting properly. Okay, so we can still see that we've got quite some distance to go. We can either cut all of that down, or we can make another mark and work that down. I think I'll make another mark. It's sort of easier to do this by sanding than by cutting, so I will prefer that option. Again, actually difficult to hold this nut in place. Just a mark, really, not hugely detailed. Again, I think I could do with changing this sandpaper because it is a bit worn out, but again, I'm just going to try and work this side to side on a fresh bit of sandpaper, and I'm just focusing on a bit of removal but also keeping the angle as good as possible. I'm listening to the latest political shenanigans in my ears while I'm doing this. It's kind of things that are moving quite quickly, and it's a strange situation. So like sitting on there, get a feel for the angle. Probably needs to tip that back a little bit. So I'm gonna put it on here and just very carefully lean back away from there, I suppose, is the way I'm thinking of it, and then just try and bring the curved bit then to a square or straight edge, keeping the angle the same the whole time, which is about that. Yep. And the thing is, if this goes wrong and it doesn't work out the way I want it, I can always go and get another one. I've got plenty of these bone nuts spare. We could take a bit more down on the treble end because we're actually quite high on that end, generally speaking, but we're looking like it's fitting, got the angle right, I think. Now the thing is, if I've got the angle right and we're nearish, and it might make sense to just work with what we've got there. And the reason I'm saying that is that any further reduction from underneath will change the angle again, and that might just mess things up. So it's like stop when you've got the part, you know, a good bit of it right, if you see what I mean. So don't worry about the bone dust and stuff. So just looking at things now, we've got the right thickness front to back. It's difficult to say what the term is because people say, how wide is the bone nut? And they go 43, and you go, yes, but how deep is it? And they go 5 millimeters. You go, no, how long is it? 42. Depth, breadth, width, or something. It's not often people refer to all three dimensions. I guess is what I'm saying. Right, now I like the way that's cut across the base, so I'm going to call that the shape I want at the bottom, and I'm going to do the rest of the work from above. But before I do it, I'm just going to put all the strings back on and just get a visual for me where the strings belong, and I want a feel of how it feels. If I go flush to this far end here, really flush, we're privileging the bass side a bit. I don't want that. So it's rare that you find a nut that is absolutely identically the same width as your guitar. This is about, I would say, about 1/4 mil short. So it's somewhere in between, but it's pretty close. So my target here, looking at the lay of the land and position of the strings, is to go pretty much equidistant on both sides, so as flush as possible on both sides. Now the reason that I did that is because once you take the strings off and you get ready to line up some glue, you don't have an awful lot of push-pull time. I mean, you want to glue it down because unlike the previous one there, you don't really want it squeaking sideways when you're bending notes or playing. Just throw some of those on the floor. Yeah, so some people don't like the idea of using glue, and that's okay if you've got a great well-fitting strap slot or something like that and the nut just is perfectly sized to go in there. But it's not often the case with these, especially when you have to butt them up against the front edge to get them to fit. So now I'm just going back to that quick feel. I want it to feel kind of equidistant, and that I think is that. Now once I'm fairly confident, then you might as well get the strings back on middle first so it doesn't pull the guitar nut to one side or the other. And then this is a sort of just a test point, and you get the strings on, you look at the positioning, you go yeah, 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 and then you tighten the middle ones down and then outwards one by one, so you don't end up stressing the nut one way or the other, because otherwise it can pull it out of position while it's gluing and then you've got it set in the wrong place. Now as it stands right now, that is just gluing, setting, and that's no problem. You could take a break, go off and get a cup of tea or whatever. I'll leave this here. Oops, sorry. Let's have a quick look. Nice thing about being busy is you've got constant stuff coming in on your social media-y things all day long, but it probably interferes. I don't know if it interferes with the phone. It used to. Thanks Tom for the Fender joke. First a Fender? No, Gibson first, then a Fender. Okay, so what we've got here now is we've got a fair bit of work to do on the precise action, but the nut is going to sit in as tidy as it's going to sit. It's never going to be absolutely perfect, like I say, because it's, unless you start with an oversized one and you cut back inwards, but even that's difficult. So we've got it the best positioning. We've privileged the strings and the playability more than anything else. Okay, so what we've got to do now is we've got to get ready for the nut slot work, which in this case is going to be quite relatively extensive. So again, we want to tune up to pitch, only for the sake of tension. It's probably go off. Remember, it's a floating tremolo, so it's going to change as you tune up, but let's see if I can get there fairly quickly without using the tuner, because it's easier. Some kinds of things vibrating in here. Wow, is it the spring? Yeah, it was. Something else here. Something loose. I mean, it's bouncing at the end of its travel, but right, we want it in tune just for the purpose of tension, really. While you cut the nut slots, you want to make sure that the strings are under playing, close to, if not exactly at playing tension, because you want them to sit right down in the slot. You don't want to run the risk of them kind of accidentally sitting up because they're caught on the way down, and then you tension them up later on when you put it, tune it up, and then lo and behold they pop down into the bottom and you're on the first fret without realizing it. So I'm working on a 0.3 of a millimetre height over the first fret, action over the first fret. And so what I do is I'll start and I'll cut this nut slot down to fit that. Now I'll try it with the nut file first, and if it's close, I can just use that alone. If we need to take a bit more material down, then it makes sense to use the more crude jeweler's files, which don't round out the shape of the slot quite so much, but also accurately, but they are good for moving a lot of material. Wow, that's really quick. I didn't expect that to happen. So despite all my precious hard work, we may have already gone down below the minimum mark, and I may have to actually start the whole damn thing again. Can you believe that? That is the... we're on about 2 now, 0.2. Okay, look at that. Shot myself in the foot. It's just the way it is. I probably... we're about 0.2, which is too low for my liking. Well, there you go, look at that. Remember I said about having a spare one? It's the spring on here that's rattling. No. Gotta find what this is because it's driving me mad. Something in this. Something in all this that's rattling, that's causing the noise that Hugh's reporting. Yeah, well, how about that? That's a complete start again. I just hate that. Yes, I mean, could build it up with a repair. It's doable, but it's against my religion. Yeah. Too low. Look at that. Look how quickly that goes past the point. I'll start again. What an absolute pain in the... what's it? I mean, I say start again. I could. What's the word? I could raise the whole nut and we could use it and just cut a bit further down. But you know. I could give it a little lift with a little bit of white bone or something underneath there, but we've got to start again really, one way or another. So I think what I'll probably do, and that is just a tiny cut too far beyond the mark we were aiming for, so it's gone down past the target point, and that's how quickly you can do it. That actually cut faster on that nut than I've seen it cut recently, so I don't know if it was a fraction softer than what I'm used to or whatever the reason. We were down below the minimums. Minimums. Right, so I'll either replace it or make another one exactly the same. I mean, I'll either shim it, which is probably... shimming would be great fun if I had loads of really thin bits of bone, but loads of really thin bits of bone are incredibly hard to get. For the simple reason that they are hard to get. An absolute, there we go, just fiddle for fun. Got an absolute ton of spare parts and bits. I've probably got some thin bits of bone. See, that's a saddle blank. Sometimes white plastic, if you get the right match, is quite good. There's a bit of cream plastic. My God, that's a bit of binding, but it's a premium. But it's too yellow. A little bit of bone, but again, we could hoist it with a piece like this. But it's almost as, you know, you almost might as well start with a new nut, really. To be honest, by the time you stuck that on and ground it down to where you want to be. I mean, it's very easy to shim it with some. Very easy to shim it with something like a couple of sheets of copper, for example. That's a really simple way of doing it. There's one shimmed and a piece of plastic. Very, very effective. stays there. But of course I don't have any plastic of the right. I've got a couple little bits of bone, but it's just very difficult to get it so thin. A little bit there, but again it would take me quite a while to actually sand that down by hand. I'm going to try it for fun. But failing that, just use another one. But my only question is which is going to take the longest to get to size. Darnation. Overcut. Overcut, undercut. Travelling free. That's a perfect fit as a spare bit of bone. Pre-worked. Yeah, I found that you can use, oh watch out, we've got a load of these graphite, we've got graphite nuts here. There's a graphite nut, keep that out because we needed one for another one. Yeah, I found in a number of times using a copper tape, very thin copper tape, is a really simple way of doing it. Shimming something, because you can build it up very precisely at whatever pace you want. But come on Roger, it's one of those things that stands out a little bit, so I prefer not to do it if possible. So, yeah, I've got some extra little bits of leftover bone here that might also fit the bill. Oh yeah, just about spot on. Oh well, we'll see. I mean, as I say, it's not strictly necessary, or we don't absolutely have to repair it, but I quite like doing that rather than, you know, using a whole new one. I've got two of those adjustable Les Paul nuts, which again typically I would have probably used one of those. But there's a replacement just in case. Oh, anyway, I've got a ton of them. What am I? Just time really, which is going to take the longest to get to where we need to go. And it's going to take that time and that time again. But anyway, I can do it all off camera, so you don't have to watch it through again. You saw what I did the first time, and this time I won't cut it quite so far down. Yeah, I'll do it off camera, and I will go and get a cup of tea, and I'll see you when that's redone. And really, that's what we're doing with this guitar, so it's going to take me twice as long. But that's my mistake, not yours. See you in a bit. Okay, sorry. Nut with a new base on it, hooray, because it's pretty much all good. Nut adjusted, recut, and now we have a bit where I'm just taking off the excess material that we don't need on the nut. I'm doing it carefully, obviously, so as not to touch any of the paintwork. So the secret of this is to take it down until it's a fairly good looking finish, but you don't want to go too far with this. And equally you want to see this, you want to be able to smooth it off in all meaningful directions, so it's nice and easy to handle. You can finish the rounding off sharp bits by using a three-sided file as well. The key thing is you need the slots to be deep enough to hold the string, but they don't need to be absolutely massive, so we can go quite a long way in removing material from the excess material from the nut. But just as you're doing it, just stop and check once in a while that you're not getting too low and leaving the strings stranded, or else we'll be back where we started. So we drop it in there and we go, plenty of room to hold the string, yes, tons of room. I mean, we won't take it down to an ultra low level, but it is a good way to get rid of everything we don't need above the string, really. Just need a careful hand on the file, make sure it doesn't run away from you. Because the last thing, of course, you want to do is end up scraping the hell out the frets, because that will cause you a lot of extra work. And then basically we get the 3-point file, the safe edge on it. We'll just round off the sharp bits right on the corner there, so it's nice and smooth and doesn't dig into your hand when you're playing. There we go. And then, as well as that, you can just take the sharp bit off the front edge as well. As long as you're not down at the place where the strings sit, you can get a much nicer, softer feel out of it, like that. Okay, so that's nicely positioned. And anyway, I'm not gonna put the strings back on because I've just done everything I need to do, and now the time has come to clean up. Now, what I'm going to do with this, while I'm at it, is I'm going to have a look around under here. We need to do some. I want to do a bit of. I didn't go and have my cup of tea, but I'll do that afterwards. I want to do a bit of what's that stuff? Contact cleaner spraying in there, because we've definitely got some bad, well, not bad, but just dirty pots, baby. And it's kind of making some of the knobs act a bit like an on-off kill switch, which is not really what you want. So these are 9s, remember, so we know where we're going with the new set. Now, it may be, it may technically not need new strings, but I think my watchword is always to replace strings when you've been kind of using another set to cut nut slots, because the strings get stretched and stressed, and I think you want to start with a fresh set. And what I'll also do is give the fingerboard some oil too while we're at it. So there's the nut, nicely in place, nice and smooth. Again, if you want to, you can still. Where did I just put the file? There it is. Hidden. Yeah, you can get a good all-round feel and just give it a little softening around the front edge. And then again, shaping wise, if you're into shaping it as well, you can continue with a block of sandpaper. Again, the difficulty of that is same with anything. You've just got to be confident in holding it and keeping it away from frets and paintwork. There we go. Oh, looks okay. Right, so this bridge is actually screwed on, so it won't come off easily. I'm not going to particularly interested in trying, but if you look at this, I'm wondering if some of the vibration isn't coming from all of this in here. Now remember, I just wanted to also have a look and see if this is standing on any. It's standing on stilts. You could improve the brake angle on this for what it's worth by taking out these little spacers under here. I've got my carefully tape shielded screwdriver to kind of improve the fit and minimize the tear out of using these bolts, and never the strongest things. Okay, so sorry, it's not washers. What you've got here is you've got the original Stenning Proud doofers. If you had those flush, you could even file them flush. If it was that big of an issue, you could take them down and seat this flush on the surface. It would improve the brake angle just slightly. I'm trying to figure out what's the rattliest thing going on in here. I think there's a couple of things. I think there's a lot of these bridges are interesting. Just see, is it a one single screw? Can it be one single? That's a fixed point there, isn't it? Yeah, it has to be. So what does this do? That turns and that drags that along backwards and forwards. There's no springs. They're not massively loose. I mean, that is a bit of a wider notch than the other ones. And possibly because they're in the wrong place. I don't know how easy this would be to get out, but you'd really... I think what's happened is that this is back to front. The notches are slightly bigger on these and smaller as we go up here. So, God, this feels really... this feels... Right, this is the up and downy part. What you'd really want to do, Hugh, I'm not sure I feel like challenging myself to this, unless this little, I don't know if this little hex key comes off. It should do. We should be able to come right out. But it's back to front, which is why you feel that it's the wrong notch. But that isn't. I don't think that's making the various buzzings. I think the buzzings partly coming from the tremolo. I think it's defaulting to being too loose. I don't really know what the adjustment would be on that. It's a user adjustable unit, so you should be able to find out by studying the Duesenberg tremolo department how to increase or decrease the tension. So looking at this from the point of view, Ibanez pending. Looking at it from the point of view of the notches, bonus notches, those look like they're cut for the wound strings, and these look much smaller. So technically, let's just have a think where we'd go. Let's give ourselves a start point to go back. So this one, the saddle is on the high E as we've currently got it. The saddle is launch point is, call it 8.6, so we'd want that to become that, so 8.6. So it's interesting because typically this would be, style wise, the screw is usually facing forward on these kind of things, but doesn't really mean too much. Okay, so that would be our start point there, and then we could sort of balance the other ones in a fair spread between those, and then come back and look at these. And this is straight line, so that this has to be the full spread. Let's see where we get with this. But this is now putting the notches round to the right way, so I think that's going to, it may improve even string life for all I know. But this is, God, it's so fiddly. I think we have to go with which way round these little saddles are. They are definitely not hugely cooperative. So if the high E, rough, isn't it, mate? Rough. Okay, we can make adjustments afterwards. There's a lot to move in here. Obviously that goes up and down for height, and comes right out like that. Even when it was done up, it seemed to move a lot, which isn't so bad. It rocked okay. We could go from side to side, and that's good for the tremolo, basically. So we're going to have to intonate this with the new strings on anyway. So we'll turn it round rather than try and reverse these, because that's more trouble than it's worth. We'll put the Duesenberg Trem back on. Get out of the way of the arm, please. And that one back in. Well, I can't do anything about the know what to call it, the brake angle, but it's not too little anyway. It could be a little bit better, but it's not actually a problem. So we don't need to fix it. Right. I don't know if anything in here is rattling around, but anyway, next bit of fun is, I forgot that would happen because I forgot to do up the bits, didn't I? Let's do up the bridge a minute. The problem with this is, can we get, yeah, we can just about get in there. So we have got access, just about. This little retaining thing is now going to be quite difficult to get back on. I don't have a little socket or anything that's going to do this the way it should. It's going to have to go on with, it's not going to want to do it, is it? Flat bladed. Okay. It's also trying to turn the, you have to hold that and try and turn it at the same time. Is that on there at all? Does it want to go? Yeah, there it is. Or is that just falling off? Hard to tell. A bit on the primitive design, but it's a kind of, I think the idea of these little screws is once you've got the action set, then I think the idea is you'd hold the screw, no, hold the post and tighten the screw up. That's what I have a feeling it's all about. It's a little bit crude, but it'll work. So let's try using, let's wind this all the way in first. Cheated. I used the thing back to front there. Okay, well we'll tighten that up when the time comes, but you can see there's a lot of movement first of all. It feels okay at the moment, it's not under tension. That's on. Let's just take a look in here and do the contact cleaning. I'll show you inside. Check the jack socket as well. I had a play of one of the other ones last night, the Cosmos, and it reminded me that I had no idea whatsoever about how the switching worked on it. It's a complete crazy nightmare. So this looks fairly original. We've got a bit of tape in here. It looks like it's kind of theoretically to stop something touching out. Yeah, it's very similar to the wiring that I had in the Ibanez Les Paul copy from the same factory, same era. See in there? Keep it as still as I can. So we've got capacitor, braided wire coming in, touching out there on the, grounding out on the pot. Same there. Jack plug comes out to the switch rather than any of the pots, which is, that's because it's the way it is, because it's a four pot arrangement. Right, so the switches are, the pots are just dirty basically. There's nothing majorly wrong with them. Majorly. Problem is, I right in a second don't have a little red nozzle, so I'm going to have to be a little bit careless with this spray. Not ideal. Oh, this has got to go in the house too. I'll go in the house in a minute when I go for a cup of tea. Right, so I'm going to just shoot this in, unless I put it in here. That would have been a smart thing to do, to put your only remaining spray nozzle in here rather than lose it somewhere in the untidy shed. But guess what, I didn't do it. So I think I might have to, I don't know what the word is, artificially do my thing. Let's try it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ow, that went on my fingers. Come on, get in there. Into the pot, please. Oh yeah. Clever. Now, desperate. Yes. Yes. Desperation. The mother is the necessity of necessity is the mother of invention. Now, the point about this business, people often go, oh yeah, stick some stuff on my pots. The only thing that will really get these pots freed up is working them. Really, the only thing that stops them working is the fact that they've got dust and sticky airborne oils, all that stuff that builds up on the top of the kitchen units, you know, that stuff I mean. And that sticks to the contacts and stops them transmitting, or, you know, stops them making a good electrical contactio. So you've got to use them or lose them. Unfortunately, there's no real better way than that. So I can help it along a bit by spraying some stuff in there now, doing that quick bit of thingying. I just chopped a hole in my finger. Well, look at that. I've got glue stuck. While fixing that nut, I ended up basically gluing it to my finger. And as always, it was hardly doing any sticking to bone. It was, oh, bone to skin, that's nice. We were meant to be together. So let's stick together. Come on, let's stick together. And so it did, and I had to painfully prise it off. Okay, right, so look, that is the beast. With a bit of help to thingy up the free up the pot. What do they call them things? You know, variable resistory thing. Clean up the metal contact faces on that, and then just as much turning as I could do to free it up while there was some contact cleaner in there as well. Doesn't hurt to do it at the same time, but it is mostly usage. It needs to be. I mean, if you haven't got any contact cleaner, by the way, you can clean contacts yourself just by doing 10 minutes of heavy knob pulling. Okay, I'll get my hat, leave the room. But you know what I mean. That's just how it works. Think of the inside surfaces of those variable resistor things we call pots, or whatever. No, they're not resistor. What are they called? Oh, you know what I mean. The two surfaces that have to touch. Contacts. It's probably isn't good a word. You know what I mean. Sorry if it's not terribly scientific. Right, strap buttons good to go. Now what I'm going to do at this point is I am going to put some oil on it. Oh, somewhere I've got that Dunlop 65 stuff, which I've never used. Warning, maybe harmful if swallowed. Guitar polishing cleaner. Directly onto the finish. I think this is a cleaner for the guitar. It's not really a fingerboard. That's it. I'll use my regular oils. Oil the fingerboard. I'm trying to find a sort of grimy, if enough, rag that's been used this before. So yeah. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, I haven't found the source of the rattling other than you know, I looked inside while I was just there, but I couldn't really see anything loose. It feels like it was either coming out through the bridge, which wouldn't surprise me because that bridge has got quite a lot of movement in it. Either coming through the bridge or possibly in the at-rest position of the tremolo or vibrato. Where we're going, nines, baby, nines. Right, rise. Take one, put one away. So got through so many strings, it's unfunny. Two in there. Oh, 10s, 9s and 10s. One for now. Two for later. One for now, rubbish for later. I've got to take a trip to the tip and get rid of all my waste materials. I've got a big bag of parts and metal detritus as well, which is kind of cool because I've been collecting it rather than just mixing it in with the other stuff. So I feel very noble that I've been trying to do that. So I've got to, but it ends up being a very heavy bag of stuff. Okay, so this is a bit, not exactly tricky, but it's a bit fiddly to get this strung up because you're always basically working with this tremolo bridge, which sort of wants to fall off at the first. The string wants to come out at the first opportunity. So you pull back like that and you go, aha, I've got the amount of string pulled back for the wind on, but now it's fallen off the end. So before you do anything else, you ought to go back to this end, put it on, and then keep the whole lot under tension, and then let it come around a second time and go under the slack string second time. Quick check, quick check, quick check, everything looks good. I'm just letting the oil soak in, and I don't need to rub it all off just now. It'll soak in and then kind of disappear when we start stretching things. The other thing to do is get all your holes lined up before you do your winding on, because it can just save a bit of frustration. Yep. Okay, I have got a ton of things to do. I've got Nick's guitar to finish and wire up, which has got to get out to Arizona in the next week, I'm hoping. It's been a long time in the coming, but good old Nick's very patient. But yeah, we've had a couple of different changes along the way, but that's no problem. I'm waiting for some veneer, some power ferro veneer, so I can try and make a laminate. I'm trying to make a laminate tremolo cover with a variety of different veneers, but it really doesn't want to behave very well, veneer, for some reason. Oh, let's put it another way. I've used some roasted oak veneer to begin with as a sort of base for it, some leftover stuff, and it's slightly crinkled, and so actually getting it to end up being a flat plate has seemed nigh on impossible. So it may also have still not got to that point yet. So I may have to rethink. This is why most of the time, manufacturers use a plastic plate, because you have the required stiffness and the required, whatever else the word is, thinness. But trying to do wood when you haven't got any room for insetting, if you inset the wood like I've done with the electrics cavity cover, well, it's designed for that to be inset, and so it can be 5mm thick and inset a long way. But the key thing is, because it's inset, it can be that thick, and then in being that thick it doesn't buckle, and it looks great and stays in shape. But as I say, the real problem with thinner things that have to be thinner, is you don't really, you either have to have them, they have to either be thin or you have to inset them, in which case this guitar that I'm making, or finished nearly, isn't designed, it's not thick enough to have a 5mm inset for the trem cover, and it would hit the tremolo block. That's the basic constraint. So it's not really about designing it from an earlier point. It just there isn't room in that location for a guitar with that thickness of body. Anyhow, so it's just nearly there. I've just got to wire it up now, and it's It's a guitar with a custom built dummy coil in there, so that the single coil in the neck is able to run in high gain mode without noise, and it's surprisingly effective, even though it's a fairly homespun solution. But you can slave up basically a demagnetized, depoled single coil. I think as long as it's reverse wound to the one you're using, and you can hook it up, and it will act as a sort of silent humbucker partner, or second in the pair that you would normally find in a humbucker. And so, although it doesn't produce any tone, its interference, or whatever I don't know what you call it, it's whatever cancels the whatever of the whatever. And I kind of really didn't expect it to work. I thought it was a bit of hocus pocus really, and I read a few little articles and it seemed all very salt over your shoulder and whatnot. But actually I put one together on one of my treble guitars on Trekkie 1, and I didn't really have a funny thing. I wired it up and changed the wiring on it twice. Never really checked it, and then a couple of weeks back I actually went back and properly checked it, and I did a back-to-back with another single coil, similar single coil guitar, hooked up to the same amp settings, and to my amazement it actually worked. Now the bridge is too low at the moment, so the first thing I'm going to do with this is raise the Titanic bridge. Somebody's bleeping at me. So to do that I have to use this, don't I? I'm going to have to do this. Oh, that's quite high as it is, so I don't have to do much there. So a bit of a sort of slow order of things now. I'm trying to get the mixture of get the tension back up and the action back to where I want it. So let's get the tension close-ish. Now that's going to change tune in a minute, but it doesn't really matter because I'm just looking for the actions at this point in time. So we've got 1 point, we're sort of 1.6, we're right there on the mark on where it was before, and then the first fret action is too low at the moment, whereas before it was higher. Now while I'm doing this up, I'm going to take the opportunity, sorry I'm being a bad camera person always, while I'm doing this up I'm going to take the opportunity to hold, if I can, hold this screw so I can effectively wind that on while I'm raising this. Is that how it goes? Something like that. Yeah, a little bit. Just killing two birds with a stone. 1.25. Now we wanted to go 1.75, that's where Hugh had it. So let's just get the action right, and then I'll attempt to tighten up the retaining screws and see if that does anything to help reduce the amount of buzz. 1.6, so a tiny fraction more. We should be on the mark. .5, 1.75. I'd say we're pretty much there. Now, the next bit is, can we just do up these little fellas as much as we can without turning the action any further. So that's done up. I wonder if that will help reduce any rattling when these are stiff. Okay, interesting little system. Locked in place now. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just this a second, sorry about that, I'm going to cut off these excess bits, and the bit I'm interested in now will be the intonation. Since we've switch the bridge around to put the notches in the right place. That's the first thing. So get rid of all of this leftovers. Metal in the metal department, which needs to go to the tip. Oh, God, I can't even lift it. Feeling good, feeling good. Right, let's get a tuner wire. Small black wire for fun. So this is just kind of an intonation test, just to see how far off the mark we are. But remember, we've still got muchly stretchings to do. On. Let's do it in the upright position now. Okay, flat, too far back, so let's push this further ahead a bit. But it looks pretty well within range. Of course, the only constraint being you can never blasted well reach the screws when you're doing this on a tunematic style bridge. Not far off. We should be fairly easily within range on this. I mean, we should get there no problem if I go the right way. Counterclockwise, Samuel. My name isn't Samuel, by the way. I sometimes call it to myself. Close, a bit more. Counterclockwise, remember. Okay, I think that's the mark for the wound strings, so I'm going to re-accommodate the D, I should say, and the same for the low E. Come along. Right, let's try the bottom two. Again. Mm-hmm. Good, good. Long, bring them back, or push them forward I should say. Counter, oh my god, hard to get access, counter clockwise. Long way. Get there, get there. Okay, should be about right. Nice. Now I'll put the other two in line with that, following the guide of the previous set, looking at the same sort of spacing gaps. Good. This bridge is nice. It's got got a ton of room for intonation, so much more, I'd say nearly twice as much as a standard Tune-o-matic bridge, so I'll give it that much praise, although I'm not so keen on the fact that the screws are right where the strings are, but so you can't get around that really. Good. Intonated, and this time the correct way round vis-a-vis the notches. Okay, right, I'm going to call that one done and take it in the house and take a break, and then be back out for another one of Hugh's wonders. As I say, bit less rattle coming out of this now. Quite resonant because of the ply and the air gap between the ply and the rest of the ply or the wood. I wonder if that's loose. It's a funny little, no, it's okay. Sometimes you can get the gap being too close and it'll thrum. So, you know, if you do get more of it, sometimes it's always worth just, you know, putting a cocktail stick in there or a little swidge of paper and just, or plectrum, just see if, you know, there's some sort of vibration. I'm not saying there is, but, you know, just. Now that's pinging down at this end. So that's the sound of the strings scraping across the nut, the bridge saddles. But the only way around that is a roller saddle. Actually, it might. Is it that? Yeah. Feel it just slightly pinging on the G. B. The B. I don't know whether it's from the saddle or whether it's as a result of the string maybe moving in the back here, but you can't really get rid of that unless you've got roller saddles, that's pretty much exactly what they're used for. I mean, look at this, within a normal range of movement, there's hardly any. The important thing is it's not coming from the nut end, and you can feel it by putting your finger on the, actually on the pressing down on the back behind the B string here. It's definitely on the, say it's on the B. You can feel the vibration most there, and it's not here. You can feel. So just to let you know, Hugh, that's where that's coming from. But as I say, the only real way around that is kind of to lose this original bridge. Actually, Schaller does a good looking version of that, which would suit this guitar. A Schaller 3D bridge with rollers on it. They used to make a non-3D bridge, as in only the rollers were set the 3D bridge, the rollers can be moved side to side, which isn't also bad because you can kind of make small adjustments to where your strings lie if you want to. But it's a fairly flat unit with fairly, not vintage look, but it's a non-standard look, and it would suit this kind of guitar, and it works well. I've paired them up before with the Duesenberg tremolo. But you know, this is the problem with a tremolo that's partly rocking, but it's not rocking that much. One of the ways, bizarrely, if we were to loosen this off, you would probably find that this creaking might actually reduce very slightly. If I could actually get my spanner in there, in that thing. Look at that. There you go. The creaking was partly because I'd tightened this up to shut down any vibrations on this, but in tightening it up, it stopped the bridge rocking so much, and what happened was then the string was being drawn backwards and forwards through the saddle. With that now looser, you've probably got more chance of things buzzing, the bridge components buzzing, but you've lost the creak of the string going backwards and forwards over the saddle. Presto! Solution. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Back onto another one of Hugh's guitars very soon. See you in a bit.